Even the Evangelions themselves were not spared from this disgusting transmogrification. The only character that they didn't really change was Gendo, probably because they were too afraid to. I'd imagine the production of 3.0 went a little something like this. Okay, now Gendo, we're just gonna make you into a cyborg and attach some laser swords to your arms, and in the next scene you're gonna take Shinji to the park and have some quality— No. Okay, well, this time around there's gonna be a bit more father-son interaction, so we are attempting to re-establish— No. Okay. I'm just gonna go get Anno. I'm not entirely sure how to handle this. I'll allow the space glasses. These are baller as all fuck. Or something along those lines. Everything in the rebuilds is over-exaggerated, while at the same time less intense. There's more action, more fan service, more Evangelions, more explosions, less substance. 2 Lances of Longinus, 2 Giants, more legs, more arms, more DBZ-style transformations. More, because more is better, right? Because the phrase less is more doesn't exist to shun and discourage things like this from happening in the first place. At times, the rebuilds attempt to come off as more hardcore than the original. Look guys, we put Asuka in the cockpit of Evi Unit 3. Haha, it seems the stakes have been raised, huh? But this time we're gonna blind Shinji so he can't even see what's going on. The reason why this scene was so intense in Neon Genesis is because Shinji watched as he brutalized Toji, one of his few friends. He saw it all, and this was removed from the rebuilds for what purpose? You wanted to give the CGI team more work? It's the same deal with Kaoru's death. At first glance, it's way more hardcore. Whoa! So crazy compared to Neon Genesis, except for the fact that the reason why Kaoru's death even mattered in the slightest bit is because Shinji was the one who killed him. Not anymore. No lengthy budget cutscene that made episode 24 of NGE so memorable as we were forced to put ourselves in Shinji's situation, kill the last remaining person who cares for you and be lonely and mentally unstable for the rest of your miserable existence, or let the world be destroyed. No, now it's just a generic bloody explosion. Instead of legitimate relative intensity, it comes off as edgy at best. Wait a minute, we've heard all this before. Remember the blood pinatas I talked about in Elfen Lied, and how it made the show difficult to take seriously? Well, it seems we've come full circle then. The rebuilds are like a decorated attention whore with loads of makeup and revealing clothing begging for acknowledgement, while Neon Genesis is the shy, timid girl at the back of the class wearing a long skirt, glasses, and reading Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time. Sure, one's flashy and might be fun for an evening, but at least the other one has some depth to her. And if you're a woman and don't really follow, just reverse those roles with Dwayne Johnson and Ryan Gosling, I guess. Then again, Ryan Gosling is really hot. One thing that I see a lot when people bring up when arguing where the rebuilds went wrong is in 3.0 with the whole coma thing. If you don't know, 3.0 takes place 14 years after 2.0 when Shinji wakes up from a coma / being stuck inside Unit 1. A lot of people say that in doing this, the production team made all of the character development in 1.0 and 2.0 seem irrelevant, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't believe the character development in 2.0 was anything to get excited about. There's an exception to my thoughts on this, and I'll get into that later. Make a note of that. But all in all, I did not like what they did with my Shinji, with my Rei, with my Asuka, and with my Misato in 2.0. It was my least favorite aspect of the film. In contrast, I think that 3.0 knew where it was going and knew that it was going to be an ambitious take on the story in comparison to the 2 movies prior, and in taking this time leap step and throwing the audience for a loop, they kind of expected us to be able to fill in the blanks. And while there still are a lot of blanks being filled here, and it probably could have been handled a bit more tenderly, I think that the way the characters act and are portrayed in 3.0 is how the characters in 2.0 would have acted 14 years after this semi-catastrophic event, and that means that the team did do their job, more or less. The time skip to me was my favorite part of 3.0. I thought it was awesome that the team would take such a ballsy risk, and it really gave me high hopes for the series after 2.0. But as the film progressed, it began to remind me more and more of why the rebuilds simply could not match up to their predecessor. I mentioned Anno's depression in a lot of the first part of this analysis, and I put a lot of faith in that being a heavy influence of the show, and I got a lot of shit from it, from you guys, I mean. Along with the debate of religious concepts thrown in, and which a lot of you seem to be confused on. Anno has been quoted saying many things, from telling us fans that we look too deeply to find meaning in otherwise meaningless moments in the series, and he was disappointed with this aspect of the story, and this only happened due to budget constraints, and this, and so on. And let me tell you this, budget restriction and religion were 2 of the best things that could have ever happened in Neon Genesis Evangelion. Without that budget, we would have never gotten those fantastic, if admittedly a bit drawn out, last 2 episodes that helped Eva gain its celebrity in the first place. Without it, we would have not been treated to this. and instead we would have gotten something like this.
Drop it!
And that, combined with an internally conflicted Hideaki Anno, largely contributes to what makes Evangelion so good. Anno is an artist. No, I'm not saying he's a prodigy or anything, I just mean he's an artist. He creates things. Downplaying themselves is what artists do. They release something great while everyone's drooling over its majesty, and they are the ones who point out the most critical flaws because they're constantly striving to make things better. Because of that, you need to take everything that this man says with a grain of salt. As for religion, let's just clear this up once and for all. No, the Christianic and Judaic influences were not added to Evangelion because the team thought it would be cool, as you are all so quick to point out in the comments. Anno chose the name Evangelion because it sounded cool. That's all. Does this mean that during the development someone stopped and said, hey, in this scene here you think it would be cool and symbolic to add a forehead, eyeball, vagina thing? Oh, well sure, that looks cool, let's go right ahead and do that. Yeah, that happens during production of any work, but that doesn't mean that the religion in the show is null and void. On that topic, how is religion handled in the rebuilds? Blasphemously so. Neon Genesis implemented its symbolism flawlessly. What was there you may not have caught the first 2 or 3 times through, and coming back you realize just how preciously the best moments in the series were set in. With the rebuilds, any themes that are there are left over from a previous symbolic giant, like the rebuilds are feeding off of Neon Genesis's table scraps. It's insulting to not only the viewers, but to the production crew themselves, most notably Hideaki Anno. Remember that explanation I gave in the first part about how Evangelion loves its science and its religion? Two things that do not play well together, yet they manage to set them side by side in almost every layer of the lore and make it work? There is no harmonious blend of religion and science in the rebuilds. Kill an angel, you get a rainbow, an explosion, and a big fat laser cross. They've gone full on magic and lost the realistic yet fantastical charm that the NGE managed to convey. If you are going to tell me that everything is going to be made right in the 4th film and that we're going to have 6 hours of character building and everyone dying, well, that's just fine, but it's still just doing what the original has already done. Then it's nothing more than a cash cow, a copy. And that's not alright. It's not alright when we've had 3 films of unapologetic, over-the-top Power Rangers backflips, exploding heads, and Jesus Christ, does every Evangelion just have a berserk button sitting in the cockpit somewhere now? That used to be Shinji's thing. It was something that you waited for because you knew that he was the only one who could do it. Earlier I said that there was an exception to my thoughts on how the characters behave in 2.0. I don't like the subtle changes to these characters. I understand that this is the objective goal of the rebuild series, to rebuild Evangelion into something different, and in that you are going to sacrifice some previously instituted character traits. But this would be relatively okay given the right circumstances. The exception. That exception runs through the territory that I didn't want to cover in this analysis, but I'm afraid I must dabble in order to make a point. If the Rebuild series is a sequel to the original Evangelion, then the way that the characters behave and react in 2.0 and 3.0 makes a little more sense, and in turn, makes the rebuilds a little more viable in their owning up to the Evangelion name. There's a range of theories out there detailing how the rebuilds might be a continuation of the series. Seele could have been, or could be now, running a simulation. Perhaps this is all taking place within Shinji's mind. Maybe the world was reset after Third Impact and the end of Evangelion because Shinji didn't like the way things turned out. Multiple dimensions, Mari Makanami is actually Shinji and Asuka's daughter from the first timeline, etc. But if this is the case, and we're experiencing a sort of do-over in the Evangelion world, then the jump-starting character development that happens in 2.0 makes it just a tad bit more sensible. Rei is positively overflowing with emotion, more than she ever did in Neon Genesis in these movies. She's cooking food for Shinji. She's smiling, blushing, looking concerned, asking for privileges, stopping Asuka from hitting her in the face instead of just standing there and taking it like the old Rei would. There's the key term, old Rei. If this Rei is a continuation, or an evolution if you will, of the prior Rei, then it would make sense that her mind, in some way or another, has retained a social development during its time in the Neon Genesis Evangelion timeline, and is now building upon a foundation of consolidated feelings. Where else does this make sense, albeit wildly far-fetched, but then again what isn't in the Eva Theories universe? Shinji Ikari's character and actions. For all it's worth, Shinji is a complete badass in the rebuilds. He's eager to pilot the Evangelion after a few foul-ups. He's crying out like an action hero, shooting laser beams from his hands, hugging naked chicks in the cockpit of a glorified Rainbow Gundam. He's become the typical hero archetype. Do the thing, make the mistake, fix the mistake, fight the bad guy, get the girl. This vicious circle has been present since the very first written works of fiction. It is something that NGE managed to avoid, and these actions would make slightly more sense, again, if they were building upon a foundation of prior mistakes made in a past life or past memories, or Neon Genesis Evangelion's timeline. Unfortunately, this is where the two sides of the coin do not play nice with each other. So it's a sequel. Then this character interaction suddenly makes more sense, and the rebuilds can be forgiven for their overall tone just a smidge. So it's not a sequel. Then this is just bad writing, tired execution, blatant shitting on tumultuous emotional complexity within truly unique and conflicted characters, and worst of all, shameless as the films continue to rake in money by the boatload based off of an excessive pandering, the equivalent of a 1997 Evangelion fanfiction brought to life on the big screen. Not that I don't want Evangelion to succeed either financially or critically. Believe me, I do. It's just a little spiritually dampening to see people who have never seen the original series licking the shaft and cupping the balls of all things Rebuild, and then shooing away NGE because it looks old. To summarize, the rebuilds aren't bad films. They're not even bad films when compared to the End of Evangelion, which, if you couldn't tell already, I consider to be a very good film. But they are lacking. They're lacking in humanity, lacking in symbolism, lacking in character, and worst of all, lacking in heart, soul, and saddest to me, thought complexity. Maybe I expected too much. After all, Anno pulled the artist move when he announced 1.0 long ago. He downplayed it. Maybe we should have all downplayed it as well. With the End of Evangelion and Neon Genesis before it, we are presented with mortal questions at the top of an intellectual hierarchy that have plagued humanity since the dawn of thought. If everything can be contained within reason, anything can be explained by science, and every solution has an equation or formula preceding it, then what are feelings? What is ambition? What is the point of carrying on if every interaction between individuals is superficial, and this term that we've created, genuine, is nothing more than an illusion to soften the blow of reality? And if this is the case, why live? Or to paraphrase, what is the meaning of life itself? Something that has been asked countless number of times through various artistic mediums, but has never quite been approached through film in the way that the End of Evangelion manages to convey. While in Evangelion 3.0, the most difficult question we're tasked with answering is it finally okay to masturbate to Asuka Dojins considering she's technically 28 years old now? Thank you for listening. I am Demolition D+, and this video was a big project for me. I expect this to be the last Neon Genesis versus Rebuild type analysis, but who knows. What I do know is that everything that could be said about Neon Genesis Evangelion versus the Rebuild series has not been completely covered with this analysis. Believe me when I say that I could go on. Does that mean that I might do more in the future? Sure. 4.0 might bring up some inspiration. Does it mean that I'm even remotely considering it at the moment? Well, not really. I know that you guys really enjoyed the first part, despite some flaws in its delivery and, admittedly, research. Fucking Schopenhauer. Really, Demo? But I just wanted to say that I appreciate the feedback and surprising amount of views the video has gotten. I was nervous when I put out this first part. Really, I did not think that you guys would want to hear me talk about one of the most talked anime on the internet for 16 minutes, and the reception of the video, that in all truth I consider to be my magnum opus, was really impressive. Seriously, I thought you all subbed me for dick jokes.
5,000 dicks!
So thanks again. As long as I breathe, I still have more to say about Evangelion, so stick around for more in the future.
I wish that I could turn back time, 'cause now the guilt is all mine. Can't live without the trust from those you love. I know we can't forget the past. You can't forget love and pride. Because of that, it's killing me inside. ち悪い。